Love this podcast? Support this show through the Acast supporter feature. It's up to you how much you give, and there's no regular commitment. Just click the link in the show description to support now.
Are you interested in angels, demons, ghosts, spirits, and monsters? Are you curious about their origins, influence, and how to protect against the unknown? If so, then welcome to Southern Demonology, the podcast that explores all of this and more.
Brace the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Get started today at linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply.
They say opposites attract. That's why the Sleep Number Smart Bed is the best bed for couples. You can each choose what's right for you, whenever you like. You like a bed that feels firm, but they want soft? Sleep Number does that. You want to sleep cooler, while they like to feel warm? Sleep Number does that too. Why choose a Sleep Number Smart Bed? So you can choose your ideal comfort on either side. Sleep Number Smart Beds start at $999. Prices higher in Alaska and Hawaii. Exclusively at a Sleep Number store near you. See store or sleepnumber.com for details.
Weight loss. It needs to be fast and sustainable. Noom GLP-1 starts at just $149 and ships to your door in 7 days. Take it from Lauren, who lost 22 pounds on Noom.
If I come off of the GLP-1, it's not going to automatically make my weight yo-yo back.
$149 GLP-1s? Now that's Noom smart. Get started at Noom.com. Real Noom user compensated to provide their story. Individual results may vary. Not all customers will medically qualify for prescription medications. Compounded medications are not reviewed by the FDA for safety, efficacy, or quality.
Hello all. Welcome to the first episode of Season 6. I know that I have been absent for entirely too long, and for that I apologize. Not only have I made a few trips to Japan in the time that I've been away, but I have also been working an obscene number of hours at my job. To put it into context, the past 2 weeks alone, I have worked about 160 hours. The deadlines have been tight, to say the least. However, no one is here to hear me talk about my day job. I do have quite a few interesting tales to share about my Japan adventures, and that will be forthcoming in a future episode. So stay tuned for that. Be sure to follow Southern Demonology on whatever platform you listen on to get alerted to the latest and greatest. And if you share the podcast with a friend, I will be doubly in your debt. My dear friend Chris over at the Wandering Road podcast invited me to join him for a very special conversation he had with none other than Branden Morgan, the creator and brainchild of the wildly successful podcast, The Devil Within. Not only is Branden an amazing guy, but the investigations he has done into a case in his own hometown that involves possible possession and satanic activities is frightening to say the least. So, without further ado, sit back, relax, and enjoy this conversation, which I call legitimate Satanic Panic.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Wandering Road podcast. I'm your host, Chris. Co-hosting with me today is my good friend JJ from the Southern Demonology podcast. Unfortunately, Dean can't be here today because he's out gallivanting, having a good time in Japan. Hey, Dean, bring us back some souvenirs. I like samurai swords, so if you want to ship one of those back to me, that'd be really awesome. We hope you're having a good time out there, bud. Joining us for today's episode is the host of the Devil Within podcast and actor and producer, Mr. Branden Morgan. Branden, welcome to the show, sir.
Hey, I'm really happy to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
No, thank you for reaching out to us. When you reached out to us, I was actually in the car on a road trip.
Yeah.
Driving back, I saw the email came in and I was like, okay, let me Google him. Podcast title sounds cool. And I was like, holy shit, it's the same guy. And here you are.
Well, like I said, I'm happy to be here, man. Thank you for agreeing to have me on. I appreciate it.
Branden, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your show, The Devil Within?
Yeah, sure. Purely by accident did I get into podcasting. I was an actor for a really long time. I became a writer about 10, 15 years ago. I had sold a different show, a television show, to Sony. And I was on the Sony lot for almost 2 years thinking, here's where I'm going to be forever. I'm a Sony guy. I'm a company man, all good. And then, you realize, like everybody sometime in life, that there are people that you don't even know that make decisions that completely your life, And so there were some higher level execs that decided they didn't need my show anymore. And one afternoon, just, here's your pink slip and give me your parking pass, So then I was just a 40-year-old guy with no college degree and 2 kids and a mortgage, and I needed a job. And so I had this other creepy little screenplay that I'd written about a true story about a murder in my hometown when I was 14. And it got submitted to a company that liked it and wanted to make it as a podcast. And I had never even listened to a podcast in my life. This was in 2021. So I wrote it out. We produced it. I narrated it. I interviewed people and did, whatever the best job I thought what it meant to do a true crime podcast. And I'm serious, just like caught lightning in a bottle. And the show opened #1 and it wound up the #5 show of 2021. And now almost 200 episodes later, like here I am. I think what really landed with the audience were the still unsolved aspects of the case that a lot of people think had some paranormal influence on this kid. And so that's what I found interesting about it. And beyond the fact that he was my age, he lived down the block from me. We grew up in the same town, same rules, same people, same everything. And I couldn't come up with a scenario in my head where I would slaughter my mother and then try to chop my own head off. How did this kid get to that point? So it was a little bit of investigation, a little bit of trying to understand, and a little bit to kind of quiet the own demons in my head about it.
Wow, that's really fascinating. You had that story in your pocket and it was like, let's see. And it just took off. It's crazy how that happens, right? It just takes that one little bit
that one little thing, man. And when it was the podcast network called Wondery that bought the show, and their head of marketing said one thing. He goes, listen, Branden, Satan sells. I went, wow, okay, cool. Because where I grew up, man, New Jersey's a blue state, but my town was like a raspberry in a bowl of blueberries, right? Like very red, very conservative, very Catholic, like Irish and Italian Catholics, like everywhere. And I'm from a non-religious family. Okay. So I didn't really understand a lot of that stuff. I knew these kids went to Sunday school and shit. And I was like, glad that's not me. But this kid, Tommy, man, he was a really good kid. He was a straight A student. And he was like an all-state wrestler, 106-pound wrestler. And if you know Jersey, wrestling is like a religion. It is very, very seriously taken, the sport. And he was an altar boy at the local Catholic church, like everything. He was like the perfect kid. And then something kind of snapped in him. And within 6 weeks, he went from being this poster boy kid to a satanic murderer. And a lot of people were like terrified by it. Parents were scared that, wait a minute, my teenager can murder me in my own house, right? So parents were terrified. Kids were confused, and no one really knew what was going on. And they still don't, to be honest. 35 years later, it's still like, we don't really know. The church says that it was demonic possession without a doubt. The cops closed the case as a murder-suicide, and still no one has any real answers.
If you don't mind, I'd like to stay on that topic for a little bit.
Sure.
You mind sharing, for the listeners that are not familiar with the case, what the name of that case was?
Yeah, so the kid's name was Tommy Sullivan, and this was in the late 80s, which the nation was kind of in the grips of what was called the Satanic Panic, okay, where people were seeing the devil's influence everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so, again, he was a great kid, normal kid, by all accounts, nothing going on with him, which is scary in its own right, because he obviously had some a lot of problems that everybody ignored or no one gave a shit enough about to check in on him. It was, over Christmas break, snowing outside, and one night the whole town just explodes with fire trucks and cop cars, and everyone's like, what the hell's going on? And they find his mom murdered in his basement, and she was stabbed like 50 times, and Tommy was missing. At first, everyone thought that it was a murder and then a kidnapping because they didn't know where Tom, couldn't find him. Didn't find him till the next morning. He was across the street. He had killed himself. He'd slashed his left wrist so bad that his hand was useless with a Boy Scout knife he used. And then he took the Boy Scout knife and like buried it under his left ear and dragged it all the way across his throat to his right ear, severing everything, including his spinal column. Like he turned himself into like a Pez dispenser, right? Like his head was almost off. He had a letter on him that he'd written to the greatest demon of hell, which was a contract where he promised Satan that he would battle goodness and joy everywhere in the world and defeat it everywhere he could and murder his whole family and live in the afterlife serving Satan. On this, I swear, the blah, 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 and like signed it. And he had that on him. And so that's when the cops went, oh, whoops. Okay. Then it was revealed there was a satanic cult in the woods on the outside of town where he was visiting, and the town just went completely bananas, went on lockdown. Like prom was canceled, and parents were going through all of your music and throwing away your heavy metal T-shirts and like all that. It was a really weird time in Jefferson, New Jersey back then. And then what stuck with everybody was when they found Tommy, like I said, it had been snowing and there was only one set of footprints in the snow going up to where they found his body. Okay. And the interesting thing was that every coroner or paramedic or medical examiner, doctor, anybody who saw his body, the first thing they said was, damn, who did this to him? And when the investigator said, oh, it was a suicide, they like laughed. They thought that like your kid, there's no way. Look at that. He would have bled out halfway across his own throat and lost strength. He wouldn't have had the blood going to his muscles to continue the cut, right? And besides, it would have taken two hands, and his left hand was useless because he'd already demolished it with the knife, right? So the question was, how did those wounds happen to him, right? And so the police were left with three possibilities. One, there was someone close to him that was some master criminal that was able to hide his tracks. And they looked at his dad really hard. Maybe the dad did it, right? But again, no forensic evidence, no other footprints, no nothing. Or it was cult members from in the woods that did some kind of ritualistic slaying of the kid. Or if you ask the Archdiocese of Newark, they said, oh, it was a demonic possession and Satan gave him the power to make these wounds on himself. There's no definitive answer.
So there really were cult members in the town?
Sure. Now, they were never caught because they were probably smart and they took off when all this happened. But a couple of months before that, so the youth detective in town is a guy named Paul Hart, who reluctantly became kind of the face of teen satanic murders after this. He had no previous experience with it, but educated himself very quickly and wound up traveling the country and the world, training other police agencies on what to look for. And in his report, in the months leading up to it, he had found evidence in the woods of satanic rituals happening, like animal sacrifices, like candles and shit in the woods on rocks and stuff like that. And we lived really close, like 5 minutes away from what's called the most haunted road in America, Clinton Road in New Jersey. And we'd go there just to scare ourselves and drive up and down the road and look for ghosts. If you were super brave, you got out of the car and you went to the ruins of this, what used to be a castle built there. And me and some of my friends were walking through the woods, and about 50 yards ahead of us, crossing on a different trail in the woods, we saw a dude in a mask wearing like a long like cloak, and it scared the shit out of us. And we're like, we just saw like a freaking Satanist in the woods. Like we couldn't believe that it was real. And we just turned and we just booked it out of there and went home. The general consensus was that, yes, that area, North Jersey, just over the George Washington Bridge, you drive a half hour and you're there. You're in the woods, but it's really close to a major metropolitan area, but it's also very at the same time that a lot of like weekend warrior armchair Satanists would go out there because it's quiet and it's private and your thing. And apparently that's Tommy found a home in one of these groups.
That is wild. Because at first I thought, maybe this is another case of mazes and monsters where an investigator came up and thought he saw satanic symbols everywhere within D&D and it turned out to be BS. But if you actually saw it and there is physical evidence of this going on, that's a whole different story right there.
Yeah, and JJ, that's a really good point that you make. And to expand on that a little, I've spoken about it a lot, is that all of the red herrings and all of the sky is falling reports during the Satanic Panic that turned out to be BS kind of dilute the severity of the actual cases that happened, because there were quite a few.
Right.
There were, 100 times more of the false flags, right? But the ones that were real, like Tommy, like the one up in Northern California with the girl, the movie Jennifer's Body's based on it, where those three nitwits figured that if they sacrificed a girl, that the devil would make them rock stars, right? And so they actually murdered this poor girl, right? Like it got to the point after the Satanic Panic was largely debunked that the baby got thrown out with the bathwater, right? Like when you talk about the Tommy Sullivan case, it's like, oh, it's more Satanic Panic bullshit, when it really wasn't.
The funny thing is that I had, minus the satanic elements to it, but I had a case that was very similar to that. I was friends with a guy named Jonah. I grew up in Tennessee, and he was in the same forensic activities that I was, debate, extemporaneous speaking, etc. And we actually went to like governor school together. And I lived across the hall from him for a month, and he would write me like 50-page letters all the time. And then one day during summer break, he came back home and he didn't want to go back to college because he hated it. And his parents insisted. And so he parked a block away from his house, walked up, and then attempted to kill his entire family. And he succeeded with it was either his mother or his father, I forget which, and then his sister, and then the other parent survived, but grievously injured. And he is so buried in the Tennessee lockup that no one can find him, because we've tried. And it's crazy.
Look, the human animal is dangerous as it is, right? If you have a human being who thinks that they're acting on the orders of a supernatural being, there's no stopping them. They're going to do what they're going to do, and that makes it all the more dangerous. Well, I interviewed a woman who was Tommy's middle school principal, a nun. Her name's Sister Philomena. Terrifying to speak to a believer about what they're scared of, because you see it in her face and you see it in her eyes. She was the last person to see Tommy, the last that was alive. Okay. It was his last day of school before winter break. And she told me, she goes, and I see this boy that I'd known for years, and it wasn't him anymore. It was like I was looking in the eyes of a different person, cold, empty eyes. And he was leaving class the last day before break. And I yelled I said, Tommy, and he didn't turn around. I said, if Tommy's in there, I need to tell him something. Tommy stops, turns, and it still wasn't him. And she said, I want to remind Tommy that exorcism is still a Catholic rite. And then she goes, and just for a second, that cold, empty face vanished, and it was this scared 14-year-old boy again, trembling. And he said, it's too late, sister. And he walked away. And then he slaughtered his mother and chopped his own head off.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Because, I mean, so we have covered, like, we have an entire Demonology 101, 201 series that The Wandering Road and my podcast is put together. And we have, exorcists that come on and help with some of the analysis. But we've essentially have outlined, 4 distinct phases. It is oppression, it's obsession, it's possession, and then there's a final stage of perfect possession. If there really was demonic possession involved, I'm just wondering, is it 3 or 4?
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. When it comes to a believer, and I am a believer, I converted to Catholicism back in college. The moment that I read Father Malachi Martin's Hostage to the Devil book, I was paralyzed with fear for 6 months straight.
JJ, I got to ask you something.
Go ahead.
Because something Sister Philomena told me And it may have just been, a representative of the church, covering her ass. Their new position, again, 35 years later, is that it wasn't demonic possession, but specifically because it's only demonic possession if it's an unwelcomed visitation. Okay. And it was determined that Tommy invited the demon into him. So technically, they can't call it demonic possession. Do you have any knowledge of that distinction, or could you speak on that a little?
Yeah, I do. That is where 3 differs from 4 dramatically. All it takes is an acknowledgement in order to become possessed. So the stages are this. Obsession is when it's just mental. Oppression is when that moves into the physical.
Okay.
Possession is when you actually give some kind of agreement. It could be verbal, it could be mental, it doesn't matter. And that's when the thing begins to inhabit you. But there is an alternate stage, and that is perfect possession. And this is what Father Martin wrote about in his book. Instead of a unwelcomed entity, that becomes a symbiotic entity into your life, where you form a pact and you are no longer a singular entity. In fact, I have an interview that I conducted a while ago with Victor of Trailer Trash Terrors. He used to be a nurse in Houston, and he had encounters with 3 such individuals that were terrifying, because he would say that it's almost like normal rules of society break down around these individuals. Shit gets weird, to put it simply. I mean, it's crazy. So, and that's what I'm wondering, if he really could invite something into his life that goes beyond mere possession.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's where that's the church's position right now, at least according to Sister Philomena. But something interesting, the victim here, Betty Ann, Tommy's mom, she has a younger sister. So Betty was 37 when she was murdered. Her sister was like 32, and she had a nice career as a school teacher. But the sister took it really, really hard. Obviously, who can blame her? I get it. But she took it a little further. She needed to understand what happened. She was lobbying the state to look at all of the evidence in the crime scene photos. And they're like, sorry, you can't see them. You're not authorized. You don't have the credentials. So she says, what do I need to do to be able to get all the information on this? They said, listen, you're not going to want to do it. You got to go back to school. You got to become a criminologist. You got to get a degree. You got to do this. And she goes, fine, watch this. And she did all of it. Took her like 3 years. Okay.
Wow.
She quit her job. She goes back to school. She gets a degree in criminology. She gets accredited by the state. She comes back. She goes, here's my badge. Here's this. Give it to me. And Detective Hart's like, you really don't want to see. I'm sorry. You really don't want to see it. She goes, you have to. Too bad. Here we go. So he's like, okay, you're warned. So he puts her in an interview room with the box of stuff. She's in there for 20 minutes. And Hart tells me this. He says, when she was done, she comes out of the room. She doesn't say a word. She doesn't even look at me. She just leaves. And I never hear from her again. But I find out a week when I, investigate and see what happened to her, making sure she didn't go hurt herself, right? She left New Jersey, drove to Philadelphia, and became a cloistered nun in a convent outside of Philly.
Wow.
And and that's it. So whatever she saw in that box, just too much. And she just shuts down and just sits in a cell in a convent and chills with Jesus for the rest of her life. That's it.
If I could make some correlations, JJ and Branden.
Yeah.
I went on JJ's show to share my story of me growing up in a haunted house in Queens. JJ's convinced that some demonic activity there, at least stages 1 or 2, to the point where I was on a show earlier today with the podcast Homespun Haints. They're great. Becky and Diana were awesome.
Oh, they're fantastic.
Yeah. And even now, JJ, like anytime I talk about those experiences, it feels like something's standing there watching. The entire time I was telling that story, it's just exhausting to talk about. And that it's like that thing knows when you're talking about it. I personally think whatever that was with Tommy, I think it was more of on the infernal side. And if I could make some correlations as to why the Catholic Church would probably distance yourself with it, with that situation, one, you in the 70s, I think it's the mid 70s, you have the death of Annalise Michel. where she had documented cases of schizophrenia. She had psychological issues. She was actually institutionalized and given medication and observed. And it wasn't until later on where the church got involved and she went through these exorcisms that she ended up dying through starvation. And they ended up going to court. The parents and the church fathers were charged with with basically negligence and, starving her. She was, if you look at her pictures of when she passed away, she looked like a POW from World War II. So you have that situation where clearly there was a psychological issue going wrong. And then you fast forward to 1981, where the Warrens take The Devil Made Me Do It.
Yep.
Trying to bring the devil into the court system. And obviously, I don't know what was going on with Arnie Johnson there. The way they found him, the way he had no recollection of what was going on may have been something demonic, because correct me if I'm wrong, JJ or Brandon, if you're familiar with the case. Was it his girlfriend's little brother was afflicted, and he said during an exorcism,
he said
to come to me.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then he ended up killing the owner of the kennel for whatever particular reason. Yeah, he invited it into himself. And if you watch The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, which not their best movie in the series.
Or not their best.
Yeah.
No, the second is my favorite. But like, you have that situation, and then you have this situation with Tommy. I could see why the Catholic Church would be like, hands off.
Yeah.
We're not dealing with this shit.
Yeah. In season 2 of Devil Within, I covered a case in England, up in Yorkshire in the late 70s. A guy named Michael Taylor, just normal dude, right? There was a recession in England at the time. And so he lost his job, and he had a wife and a couple of kids, and he was kind of freaking out about making ends meet. And a local person's like, hey, not for nothing, it might help. We go to this church group. Okay. It's very informal. You'll meet, at the very least, you get free tea and biscuits, and maybe you'll make some friends and make some contacts and find a job. So he's like, all right, whatever. He didn't want to go, but he goes. The woman who was the pastor was young and beautiful and flirty, and he falls in love with her. It's unrequited. And she kind of humiliates him in front of the group. He attacks her, which is out of character for him. Right. And then he starts acting weird, and everyone's like, he's possessed. They bring it to the church. The church okays a possession. All right. They tie him up. They're throwing holy water at him and chanting. And they tell him there are 48 demons that are currently inhabiting you right now. And we're going to get rid of all of them, boy. Just hang in there. An 8-hour exorcism. And then they have to stop because everybody's tired. And they say to him, we got 46 of them out, but the last 2 are murder and mayhem. So go home and take a nap, but just be careful, because just remember that those 2 demons are still inside. He goes home and kills his family. And so it made its way to the courts. Like, who is at fault? And they tried to blame the church, and the church got off scot-free. And he did a couple years in an insane asylum. He's still alive, and he's out. They said temporary insanity because he was being tortured. And I'm like, tortured by who? Tortured by priests. Yeah, but they thought they were doing God's work. Now it's different over there. The Church of England is a national religion. So it's not like here, there's no real separation of church and state over there. So I guess they just protected their own, but it was a really, and not even the young girl, the young pastor, like no blame was placed anywhere is the bottom line of it, which I think is ridiculous.
I'm into that one.
Yeah.
Reminds me, JJ, you remember we did that episode, I think it was like in the 80s or something like that, number sequence, where we talked about this exact topic, The Devil Made Me Do It. And with Son of Sam, where he said his neighbor's dog was Satan telling him to murder all these people.
Yeah, you thought the dog was a 600-year-old demon that was telling him to go kill young women.
Yeah, freaking insane. It just, that's where the line gets blurred, and where sometimes, the topic we're talking about doesn't get taken seriously, because you have these maniacs that'll, Son of Sam, they're like, okay, I maybe have some troubled upbringing. I have bad luck with women. People internalize that. The next thing they do, they get consumed by this rage. And then sometimes they personify it to some sort of being telling them to do these things. And then they go and blame someone else. When all the while, like, things like that really do happen, where you do have cases of demonic possession. I like to take an objective look to it. Like, is this really demonic, or is this person a terrible person? And they just need to get their shit together, but they went down the path in which they just decided to kill a bunch of people.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I agree that more likely, and this is going to sound kind of oxymoronic, but it's more likely today, in my opinion, if you hear of an actual demonic possession because of the safeguards that the church put in place in like 91 or 92. There was some council, Vatican Council, that adjusted they made it more difficult for an exorcism to be okayed by a bishop, and now it clearly states that all medical avenues have to be explored in terms of mental health. They have to avail themselves of the current understanding of mental disease and rule it out completely before an exorcism will be okayed. And that's a kind of an extension of an edict that already existed, where like if you have a brain tumor and you're like a nun or a priest, like you don't get to stick around. You get, I don't know if it's defrocked or if they ask you to leave, and that is because they don't want you to have a false vision. And sometimes a brain tumor can cause you to hallucinate, and they don't want you to think that you're seeing God when you're not. So if you have any kind of mental problem like that, like a tumor, you can't be a priest or a nun. And if you think someone is possessed by a demon, they have to get a mental health checkup to make sure that it's not psychosis or bipolar disease or whatever. Yeah. For something to snake its way all the way through those safeguards and still be considered demonic possession, I'm more likely to believe that it's accurate.
To quote a frequent guest of ours, Father Birdsong, who is an exorcist, you can't cast out mental illness, and any safeguards that are put into place to help distinguish that from the real thing is always a good thing.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I spent my summers in a haunted house up in New Hampshire, Chris.
You want to get into that a little bit?
Yeah.
What you experienced?
I say it's smiling because it wasn't scary. They were good ghosts. So I grew up hearing about it. And unfortunately, nothing specific ever happened to me. But I grew up around the stories with my aunts and uncles and cousins that stuff actually did happen to. And then the way the story ends is what kind of cements everything for me. So basically, they grew up in one of those pre-Revolutionary War houses, like a farmhouse built like in the 1750s or something like that, right? Tons of history and old wood and brass and antique stuff everywhere on a beautiful piece of land in southern New Hampshire. My grandmother would, things should always, like weird things would happen. They had like old antique furniture with like the couch cushions were like real feathers. So when you sat in it, like your ass left an impression, right? And so one of the last things she would do every night before bed is she would smooth out all of the cushions to start the day fresh, right? In the morning, all of them would have been sat in, okay? And she's like, okay, that's a little bit strange. My mom tells me a story that she was in the kitchen helping my grandmother do the dishes, and the cuckoo clock went off at like 3 o'clock. You're cuckoo, whatever. My mom's like, oh, that's nice. When did you get a cuckoo clock? And my grandmother's like, we don't have one. They just like, messing with me. Mom's like, she goes, whoever they are, like there was no cuckoo clock in the house, but you hear it. So that would like kind of freak me. I never heard it, but other people did. And then one of the big ones, and if you tell my aunt that she's lying, she'll smack you in the face. So my aunt had a newborn baby. She was upstairs and she was bringing a load of laundry downstairs to the laundry room, and she was coming down the steps. So she had laundry in one arm and my baby cousin Kim in the other arm. And she tripped, and she's just airborne going head first down these stairs. And it's the type of stairs where at the bottom, there's a little landing and you got to turn left 90 degrees to get into the living room. So there's a wall like right at the bottom. And she was just going head first into the wall. And she said it was like slow motion. It all happened in a second. But she goes, I remembered midair thinking, I've got to turn to my right. So I hit the wall with the laundry and not with the baby. And like right before she hit the wall, she said this huge bright light and like a laser beam went across in front of her like a rubber band and caught her and put her back on the steps. It was Christmas. The house was full. No one saw it happen, but everybody was there for the aftermath, where she's just screaming and crying, and everyone thought she was hurt, but then they realized she was screaming, thank you. And she didn't know to who. She was just yelling thank you to whoever just basically saved her and the baby's life. So that was a big one. And there are a lot of other little stories. Like the most interesting thing was that, so they sell the house when I was like 13 or 14 years old. They sell the house, but they moved right up the street. And the people that bought the house were antique dealers. So they had like hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of antiques in the house. The house was where they lived. It was also a showroom. And so they were very specific and very careful to lock all the windows and doors every night. Okay. About 6 months after living there, they invite my grandparents over for lunch. They're sitting there having lunch, and the woman in the middle of lunch says, all right, I got to ask, any weird shit ever happened to you when you were living here, right? My grandparents look at each other and they're like, yeah. And the woman says, I don't think we need to be worried. And they go, you don't. But what's going on? She goes, well, we have all these antiques and we have the windows locked and the doors locked every night. Every morning we wake up and the windows are all open and the doors are unlocked and open a little. And we don't feel in danger. And my grandmother's like, no, that's them letting you know that they're not going to let anything bad happen here, that you're safe. That you don't have to worry about locking. And they're like, okay, cool. It doesn't feel like dark. It feels like protective. And they're like, yes, 100%.
That's actually refreshing and really awesome to hear. Ain't that right, JJ? In the sense that, like, dude, everybody we talk to, you're aside from you, we had one other person, Lisa, down in Tennessee. She moved into this house, and the former owner, like, died in a house fire. This, like, middle-aged lady. The ghost is just great. She played with the kids, took care of stuff, and was just a welcoming presence the entire time. As opposed to like what I went through and some of the shit that JJ has seen, polar opposites. So, you know, it's really refreshing hearing that, you know, you had something protective in that house, helping people out, especially saving your aunt.
My dad tells a story where, you know, he was in high school and he had this dog, Jed, this lab mix for forever. And he comes home from high school after a basketball game and they lost and he was feeling and just collapses in his bed and he's restless and he can't sleep. And he hears his dog walk in. He hears like the claws on the wood floor, right? Hears the dog breathing on the rug at the foot of the bed. And he and he reaches over and pets the dog and he feels better and he falls asleep, right? And then he wakes up like 10 minutes later. Cold sweat, holy shit, because his dog had died like 6 years previous. He reaches down and he feels the rug where ostensibly the dog had been, and the rug is still warm. And he's like, okay, that kind of made him feel good, but also scared him a little bit. So, you know, and my grandmother had a similar story that we think was the dog also, where she was home alone and her bedroom was at the top of the stairs and she hears someone coming up the steps in the middle of the night. And this is in the woods of New Hampshire, right? Where there's no one around if you're in trouble, okay? And so she hears something crawling up the stairs and she's like, uh-oh. And she counts the number of steps in her head. She knows when it's at the top and she's looking and there's nothing there. Then she hears something jump and it lands on the bed. She can feel it on the side of her leg. She could see the indent in the quilt on the bed. Nothing's there. And she like shakes her leg and she goes, shoo, get out of here. And whatever it was on the bed, jumps, and then she never hears it land. She's like, okay. Well, now what? I guess I'm just gonna go back to bed. You know,
yeah,
but
nothing you could do at that point.
Yeah, never felt threatened. So, which is a good thing.
Stories about pets and in the afterlife are just fascinating because my mom had a case of that. She had a old Cocker Spaniel that would sleep with her. She rescued it and loved this thing to death, even though it hated everybody else. And when Sugar passed away, both her and my uncle were sitting at the kitchen table and they heard her claws tapping on the linoleum. Yeah, still no idea. And that lasted for about 6 weeks and then it faded. I mean, for pets to be there in our moments of need, even after passing over the Rainbow Bridge, is just...
It's their responsibility, you know, and they take that shit seriously, JJ.
That's accurate.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
We don't deserve dogs, I'm telling you.
Oh, gosh, are you kidding?
Just lost one of my own a few months ago, and I'm still close to it.
My dog died when I was 15. I haven't gotten another one since. It's just too much. I can't handle it.
And yeah, I got 2 right now. Both are 8 years old, and I get that pre-dread.
Oh, you know, yeah. It's real. It is real. Oh,
it is. I rescued Daisy when she was 7 years old from the shelter, and she lasted till she was 13. And
whew. Now, it's never
trying to drag it down.
It's never long enough. And
Nope.
one thing I'll always say is I just moved into a new home back in October. And me and my wife, we have 2 dogs and we have 3 cats. One thing I'll always say is like, okay, if the animals are comfortable, I think we're good.
Yep.
That's like my biggest indicator that there's nothing crazy
Yeah.
going around at all.
Yeah. Because dogs, I think a little more than cats, because we have cats now also. I think dogs are a little more attuned.
To get people excited about Boost Mobile's new nationwide 5G network, we're offering unlimited talk, text, and data for $25 a month.
Forever.
Even if you have a baby.
Even if your baby has a baby.
Even if you grow old and wrinkly and you start repeating yourself.
Even if you start repeating yourself.
Even if you're on your deathbed and you need to make one last call.
Or text.
Right, or text the long-lost son you abandoned at birth.
You'll still get unlimited talk, text, and data for just $25 a month with Boost Mobile.
Forever!
After 30 gigabytes, customers may experience slower speeds. Customers will pay $25 a month as long as they remain active on the Boost Unlimited plan.
Forever!
They say opposites attract. That's why the Sleep Number Smart Bed is the best bed for couples. You can each choose what's right for you, whenever you like. You like a bed that feels firm, but they want soft? Sleep Number does that. You want to sleep cooler, while they like to feel warm? Sleep Number does that too. Why choose a Sleep Number Smart Bed? So you can choose your ideal comfort on either side. Sleep Number Smart Beds start at $999. Prices higher in Alaska and Hawaii. Exclusively at a Sleep Number store near you. See store or sleepnumber.com for details.
To stuff, because they have that protect you instinct. Don't have. So dogs are like, not only are they attuned to, I think, other stuff, but then that protective instinct kind of kicks in, and so they let you know when some shit's wrong. Yeah. So yeah, if your animals are content and chill, things are good. I agree.
I did have a question for you, Branden. What are your thoughts on, since we were on the topic earlier, of demonic possession in general? Because I've been a huge fan, of The Exorcist. I've read Malachi Martin's Hostage to the Devil. I've read the Exorcist book, which I think is scarier than the film.
Absolutely.
I had to put it down a couple of times, even though that film was. I watched that movie for the first time in 2001 when I was 11 years old.
Yeah. Okay.
I wasn't supposed to, and it just stuck with me, and that's where my hate for Ouija boards started from. So what are your thoughts on demonic possession and demons and stuff like that in general? Like, you said you didn't really grow up in a religious household.
Well, I got exposed to it the first time through the Tommy Sullivan case, because everyone in town got exposed to it. So that reading and studying it more and really kind of researching it, and then now it's kind of my work, and I've done several seasons on stuff and a bunch of standalone episodes on possessions. And what I come away with, is that every religion has some kind of possession myth or possession dogmatic kind of possession kind of rules in their teachings. Or so one school of thought is they can't all be wrong. Then there's another school of thought saying we also used to think that the sun revolved around the earth because that's how it looks to us, right? And then we learned some shit through science and we figured some other stuff out. And so I'm not quite there yet, but I think there's as strong a possibility that all of these possession stories might one day be attributed to a very deep brain-centered kind of synapse not firing or something like that we haven't discovered yet, or all of these religions are correct and there's a demonic plane that sometimes they cross through and because they want to inhabit this dimension and they get into us. I'm squarely on the fence on this one, because there are some that I've investigated. There was one in Flint, Michigan, where the kid ran up the wall. People saw it, not the mom or the brother, but 2 welfare workers and a registered nurse saw it. And
are you talking about the Ames family haunting, the house that Zach Bagans bought?
Oh, Demon House.
Yeah. It was witnessed by professional people who put their reputations on the line and signed that they saw it happen. Okay. So things like that, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to tell someone they're lying. I'm not going to tell a person who swore, in a legal document that they saw what they saw. So there's some stuff that is unexplainable. Tommy's murder the murder in my hometown, that's still unexplainable. There are are questions you ask professional people. They'll be like, we don't know. Stop asking me. I don't have an answer for you. Leave me alone. And I'm like, but I want to know the truth.
Right.
And no one knows.
There's no way he could have done that to himself. There's no way.
I agree.
There's no way. It either had to have been some sort of unseen entity, or like you said earlier, some people that were really good at covering their tracks. And it depends how much it was snowing too. You said he was found in the snow. So who knows if the snow
that night, it was a lot of snow.
The snow could have covered tracks too. So like you
could have covered tracks. It would have left some kind of impression, and it's like size 6 Converse All-Star, like a grown man can't like walk backwards through those tracks without his own boot prints,
Right.
So what did he, like Tom Cruise Mission Impossible? Like, did he rappel down and like cut the throat, right? And then pull himself up? Like, who knows?
Yeah.
But some weird shit happened that we don't have the answers for.
On the religious side of things, now that you've delved into this more with your podcast and one of your recent episodes, if you don't mind, we could go into that a little bit. I haven't covered Richard Ramirez yet because we do true crime episodes. The most recent one we did was Jack the Ripper, trying to figure out like why, because apparently they said they found him. They know who he is.
Yeah.
And it's like, you try to figure out what the hell's going on. But before we jump into that, now that you've delved into like, true crime and its crossover with potentially demonic possession and the paranormal, how has that affected you and your religious or spiritual beliefs? Like, where were you before and where are you now that you kind of deep dive into the paranormal?
Yeah, it hasn't really shifted. If anything, it's kind of solidified my belief structure a little bit. Like I've been, and again, no offense to anybody, but my personal belief is I've just seen a lot of destructive outcomes with religious people. Christopher Hitchens said it. He said, good people will do the best they can. Wicked people will do the worst they can. But if you want to make a good person do something wicked, it takes religion. Okay. And especially like en masse, you get like millions of people or tens of thousands, like with the Crusades or with whatever, it's spirituality. Awesome. Totally into it. Seek peace, seek connection with something greater, seek, and I'm all for that. But I think everything that religion offers, I think you can get elsewhere without the need for it. But then I also know men and women of faith, towering men and women of faith who do wonderful things in the name of their religion. I'm not discounting that at all. It hasn't swayed my whether or not I believe in any way at all. What it has done is make me get an alarm system on my house and make me think about becoming a gun guy. Okay. Doing true crime and knowing what drives people and having young kids at home. It scared me a little bit and made me put security really kind of at the top of my list for my family.
Can't say as I blame you on that one. I mean, I am a believer, yes, but at the same time, even within just the one sphere of Christianity, you have both phenomenal representations and you also have Christian nationalism going on. So, yeah, the human element of the human church will always cause issues because of what we are.
Couldn't agree more, man. I couldn't agree more. And, I have friends across all religions here in LA. LA is such a melting pot, gay, straight, and Muslim, and Jew, and Christian, and atheist, and trans, and everything in between, right? And I'm friends with everybody. The only time that there's actual division, that I see like human division, comes from the religious side, not from like LGBTQ, not from people of color, not from any of that. It's like a Jewish person can't shake my wife's hand at a wedding because Orthodox Jews aren't allowed to touch women that aren't their wives. And when it's bullshit, my wife said, "Hi, nice to meet you." And you go, "Oh, you don't shake my wife's hand." Like, I take that personally. I get it. It's a religious thing. That's
right.
Fine. But then also, or like Christians can't do this or Jews can't do this on Saturday or whatever. It's the roadblocks to, in my opinion, and this is all just my opinion, the roadblocks to a real cohesive society, in my experience, always come from the religious side, not from like the cultural side, or not from the sexual orientation side, or not from the, the different races side. It's always the religious people. Like I could walk into I could walk into like little Tokyo here and no one's going to give a shit that I'm walking into a ramen place because I'm not Japanese and I'm in little Tokyo. No one cares, right? I go down to Olvera Street. I'll be the only white guy for 6 blocks surrounded by Latinos everywhere. No one gives a shit. But wait a second, if I try to do something, or for like a Muslim mosque comes into a synagogue, whatever, people lose their minds. So that's my thing. And I admit that I have a little bit of a, passionate kind of view on it just from life experience. But, would we be better? I can make the statement, and I've taken a lot of heat for it. I can make an argument that the world would be a better place without organized religion. That's just.
I mean, the division aspect that you speak is sadly true. I mean, if we can't accept others that are different than ourselves, and especially if we assign scripture to be that reason, then that's a big problem. But
yeah.
There's always one underlying factor that always causes division. And before I got into like the IT like career path, I love history. I got 2 degrees in history. I wanted to be a history professor, but shit happens. And like when I study, the Crusades, and even with ancient Rome, like you look at the difference of societies from antiquity and societies like in the Middle Ages, when you have the rise of Christianity, when you have the rise
going
of
from
Islam,
polytheism to monotheism, like that.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You could see the polarization between groups of people happen even more. Obviously, it would happen sometimes in antiquity, but more often or not, you would see like when Romans would go on their conquests, like for example, the Gallic Wars with Julius Caesar, their average soldiers, you have a war god, I have a war god. What does your war god do? So they just incorporate it into their belief system because it's already similar.
To give a different example, you also had the Essenes, who wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls, we believe, who thought that the Romans were the sign of the end times and that angels were going to come down and fight for them. So there is still a ton of division going on, goodness knows.
Yes, tons of division going on. It's sad, but it's where we're at, and it's not like it's new. You know what I mean? Like to your point, Chris, that's something that we've always done. So we've been tribal from the word go. Here's mine. I got to protect my family, and and if I need to, I'll come take what you have to try and do it.
Yeah, I think it's something genetic within us as well. Like even pre-civilization, because you have people I know good, people different from me bad.
Bad, correct.
Yeah.
Those people want to take my wife. They want to take my kids. They want to kill my livestock. They want to do this and that. Yeah, and to the core, when you see societies going through times of strife, that tribalism will always come back. You'll flock to people that look like you. You'll flock to people that believe in the same thing as you. And it's just a sense of comfort. There are a lot of things that humans do that I know we tend to bicker about when it comes to society and when it comes to like politics and psychology. There are certain things that we do that are genetic, that are ingrained in our DNA based off of previous experiences.
That's why we have a lizard brain.
Yeah, definitely.
There's some evidence that belief in a higher power has, through the series of evolution of endless generations of that it's become part of, like it's almost unavoidable. The belief gene, or the belief kind of portion of our brain has become ingrained through evolution.
Yeah, and I think it has to do with like motivation as well. It's an internal mechanism to keep you going, because if you think of it this way, if you take the rise of Christianity and you take an ancient Roman peasant in the late Western Empire, there's wars everywhere. You have the invasions of like Huns, Goths, all this stuff.
Yeah.
What the hell is the point of me living? But I have this belief system that I can turn to that allows me, that says it doesn't matter what you go through in life, all your hardships, you'll be rewarded in the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah.
So I'll just keep going to get to that point. There has to be a point for my existence.
Yeah.
And it happens to be that. Like for me, when I work out every day, like I used to be an atheist. I dealt with some really shitty hauntings growing up, and that pushed me back to Catholicism. I'm not the greatest Catholic. I try my best.
Sure.
But like when I work out, I'm not thinking of like Jesus. You think of shit in your head like, okay, if I don't get to this complete this mile, and if I stop running, I'll get eaten by something or something bad will happen. So I think that's connected with that belief system.
No, man. Yeah, and look, inspiration, motivation. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the problem comes with, if we don't conquer Jerusalem and slaughter everyone, God will be angry. Right. And so on an individual level, yeah, great. But then writ large across a society that shares that same, ability to be motivated by something, it can get dangerous. And but not with religion, with any ideology, political ideologies, socioeconomic ideologies, any of these big passionate kind of movements has the potential to be destructive.
Yeah, even McCarthyism in the 50s,
100%,
with everybody being a communist.
Yep.
Like
exactly.
It just has the potential to run rampant. Branden, I wanted to get into your podcast a little bit here, The Devil Within, and some of the topics that you cover. Before we talk about Richard Ramirez, I wanted to ask, have you ever looked into the Cecil Hotel?
Oh, yeah.
And all those weird things that go on specifically? Because I think Ramirez stayed there.
I think it's episode 2 of this series. I think it's 2. The whole opening is a brief history of the Cecil Hotel. Crazy stuff has gone on there, from murders and suicides, and Elisa
Lam.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That weird story. Ramirez living there. Ramirez walking through the lobby covered in blood one night after a murder, and no one said shit until the cops came and asked. And as soon as they realized, oh, that was the Night Stalker. Yeah, he was all proud. Just really, really strange and unfortunate. It's a victim of geography, right? It was built as a luxury hotel, and then city planners didn't say, well, let's have this area be Skid Row. That's just kind of how it happened, right? And so Skid Row being a block away, no one's going to go to that hotel. You know what I mean? So it's just unfortunate for the Cecil. Big 700 rooms, and it's gone through so many different iterations. I think it's subsidized public housing now. I don't even think it's a hotel anymore, because it's a war zone down there, man. It is nasty.
Have you ever been there?
Yeah. So to get from, I used to live in Hollywood, and so to get from on the freeway from Hollywood there was like a new kind of hip part of town for a while. The only way to get there really was to drive through Skid Row. You got to get off the freeway and drive like 10 blocks to where there were all of these refurbished old factories that became cool hotels and restaurants and whatever. And you had to drive through the really bad part of town. And you know it as soon as you get there, man. It is no joke. Like, you don't stop for red lights, and no one can, everyone just keep going. Just fucking go. Yeah.
I grew up in the South Bronx in the 90s, so I get it.
Oh yeah. I've been there.
I get it.
Been there. I've been to so many Yankee games I can't count.
Yeah. Have you been back to the stadium recently?
Yeah. I was there, 2 years ago.
Okay.
I caught a game. Yeah. It's really nice. It's really nice.
Yeah. Soto, that bastard.
Believe that goes to the Mets.
Yeah. Like, what was it? A $5 million difference?
I know. Garrett Cole needs Tommy John. I mean, we'll see.
We're cooked this year. I think we'll be all right, but playoffs, I don't know. I feel like last year was the chance.
I was at game through the series in LA in October. I don't want to talk about it, Chris. Damn it.
It makes me feel better. I've internalized so much.
Right? Okay. Jeez. No, because I live in LA, but when a bunch of douchebags, yell at me when I have a Yankee hat on. I'm like, all right, whatever. So no, so you want to talk about Ramirez or no?
Yeah. Let's get into Ramirez.
Yeah, well, because being a history guy, I think you'll like it. So, with all of so this is my 4th full season of the show, and like not counting the weekly episodes. But so like I did a whole series on Berkowitz, on the Son of Sam. I did that thing on Michael Taylor, Exorcism. I did Tommy Sullivan, and this season is Ramirez. And so when I decided I want to do it on Ramirez, I just started asking people in LA who lived here in the 80s when it happened, because I wasn't here yet. And they all said the same thing. They all said it's like we were descending into hell. And so that reminded me of my Dante that I read when I was in my 20s, and the Inferno and the 9 Circles of Hell. The parallel to the Ramirez story is it's 9 episodes. Each episode, we explore one of the circles of Dante's hell and how it relates to where we are in the investigation with Ramirez. And those 2 stories dovetail really, really nicely. It chronicles his drug addiction, his mental disease, the horrific conditions under which he grew up, terrible influences he had from his cousin and his brother-in-law and his dad, and then moving to Los Angeles and just being completely left unsupervised with this blistering cocaine addiction and a newfound interest in Satanism in the 80s that became a driving factor in everything. And the escalation of his crimes that was just, mind-blowing how active he was. He had like 7 attacks in the first 8 months and then like 12 attacks in the next like 6 weeks, like insane escalation in his attacks, and how confounding he was for investigators because he changed his MO almost every time. The only thing that was consistent is that he would look for an open window because there was a heat wave in LA that summer. It was like 110 degrees. People were leaving their windows open.
Right.
But he would kill by strangulation, by gunshot, by tire iron, by machete. Like crazy, disgusting, brutal things. And it's just endlessly fascinating. There was one, he broke into the house, found a 16-year-old girl asleep in bed, and he had a tire iron and just started wailing on her head with a tire iron. Okay. And then he heard her still breathing. So he's like, all right, I'm going to finish her off. I'm going to strangle her. So he grabbed a cord from a lamp, ripped the cord, tied it around her neck. And then what he recollected was he thought he'd grabbed a phone cord. Okay. But it wasn't. Wraps it around her neck. And then all of a sudden he sees these sparks come shooting out of her, and she's bathed in a blue light. And he thought that Jesus had intervened to save her life, and that Satan was no longer powerful enough to drive his actions. And he left. He took off, and she survived. And
wow.
It was an electrical cord that was still plugged into the wall, that spark, but that put the literal fear of God into him. And so things like that, he was such a true believer, making people swear on Satan that there's no more jewelry in the house, swear on Satan that you won't call the police, swear on Satan that you won't look at me or whatever, like doing all that shit all the time, and drawing pentagrams on the walls and upside down crosses on victims. Just brutal, brutal stuff. So it's been, like I said, just as kind of like an intellectual exercise, as a psychological profile, and then as a literary kind of Cliff Note version of the Inferno. I'm having a blast with this season.
Yeah, that's actually one of my favorite books and one of my favorite audiobooks.
Really?
The Divine Comedy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I'm only covering Purgatorio. I'm sorry. No, I'm covering the Inferno right now. Sorry, just the first third of it, and it's great, dude. It's great because I hadn't read it probably since in 20 something years.
If I could recommend the Audible version of it, it's just narrated so perfectly with the sound effects and everything. You'll love it. Like anytime they switch a chapter in the Inferno, there's like screams of pain in the background and all that stuff.
Well, and I did some of that in the season. Yeah.
Yeah. The narration, it's a dude with like a British accent, and I apologize for not recalling the narrator's name, but it's like, it has that perfect, like monotone type of voice.
Because it's one of the greatest poems ever written. It's so incredible. And I give I'll be a truncated history of Dante himself, because that's a super interesting story. Just with him and Beatrice, a woman that he didn't know and barely spoke to in life. He immortalized her in these works of his, So that's super interesting. And just Dante politically, how he was always trying to stay on the right side of history with Florentine politics, and made a mistake, and then he filed, and he can never return to his city. And it's really interesting story about the man, let alone the work. I draw a parallel between Dante and Virgil with the 2 detectives that are after Ramirez. One's guiding the other because he's more of a seasoned veteran who had just put away the Hillside Strangler 5 years earlier, and here's this young detective who represents Dante, who's, and so they go on the journey together. So just in terms of a story and just as a piece of art, I'm really happy with how it's turning out as true crime. And then as being adjacent to paranormal with Richard Ramirez's beliefs in Satanism and stuff, the season's doing really well. I'm very proud of it.
It's the way that you do it and construct it together. I'm like, this is well written, well produced, well orchestrated. So keep it up, man. I
Thank
love
you.
it.
I've been having a good time. Episode, I think 7 dropped yesterday or the day before. Yeah. So got 2 more, and then some bonus episodes. I'll string it out as long as I fucking can.
Yeah, yeah.
Back to the weekly episodes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been great. It's been a lot of fun this season.
Yeah, and the Divine Comedy, it's narrated by Charlton Griffin.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, so like awesome. It's about 17 hours and 3 minutes. So it's an unabridged recording. Yeah, it's an unabridged. It's all 3.
Wow, that's great. Did you study Dante in school, or did you read it on your own? Or
I had a philosophy class. We brushed over it, and then I was like, you know what? And I think it was like my sophomore year of undergrad. I went to the bookstore and I bought a copy of the Divine Comedy, and I just read the whole thing like twice over. It's one of my favorite books, and it's funny if you pay attention to who he puts in hell.
Oh, he loved tossing his enemies there. It was amazing.
Dude, how upset he was to see the people in limbo, right? Like his heroes, like the great poets who, through no fault of their own, happened to live in a time before Christ.
Yep.
Like I was sad. But in the Seventh Circle and Violence, like I was reminded, because again, I hadn't read it in so long. And from the first time I read it until now, one of the historical figures I've studied a lot is Alexander the Great.
Yeah.
And there he is in the Phlegathon, in the
one of my favorites.
Right. And I'm like, oh, damn it. But of course, I see him as a military strategist and as one of the greatest leaders of men to ever live. Is like, through slaughter and murder.
Yeah.
So of course he's in the.
But he has Caesar in limbo.
Yeah, Caesar in limbo, right?
Yeah.
But he has in hell, right? I know, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, here's a fun little historical factoid. The literature of the Ethiopic Orthodox Church actually has Alexander the Great as the greatest Christian warrior that has ever lived.
What?
Yep.
Like the 300s BC.
Oh, yeah, but that didn't stop them at all. If it was written today, it would be nothing more than fan fiction. But there are so many works that go through and categorize how Alexander the Great would just proselytize the name of Christ everywhere. It's hilarious.
What are those Ethiopians? What are they drinking out there in the Horn of Africa?
They produce some really interesting works. That's the main thing that I studied when I was at Harvard getting my theology degree, was the Ethiopic language. There's some good stuff there, though.
I bet there is. So tell me about your show. Tell me about Southern Demonology.
Yeah, so I started it back in 2017.
Okay.
And it started off really, I think my coworkers just got tired of me talking about all the weird shit that I studied in college and in grad school. So they said, okay, just document the shit. So I started, even though I have a face for newspaper and in a voice that's pretty much the same. But anyway, it's been fun, and I've grown it a good bit, and it mainly focuses on 2 different aspects. You got your let's interpret the Hebrew Bible, because I mainly focus on Second Temple Judaism. But let's interpret that correctly, and let's see how the ideals that were grown up during that time still impact directly how we think of these matters today. And then flipping over to the modern side and looking at protection mechanisms and how exorcisms work, etc. So
I have a friend in LA. He's been one of my best friends for like 30 years. His best friend, he's older than me. His best friend that he grew up with is this super crazy rich dude. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently he paid the Vatican untold millions to get complete access to the archives, to the Vatican archives.
Oh, holy crap.
Oh my God. Can we go?
With a representative, of course, with him the whole time, but unfettered access to whatever he wanted to, like anything, proof of whatever, proof of anything, proof of this or that. Like he held like one of the original copies of the Ritual Romanum that had all the incantations.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like all of that.
Holy shit.
Yeah. And he couldn't have a phone, he couldn't take pictures of anything, and he had to sign some NDA or whatever. So he can't of course he can't talk to someone like me because I have a show and I would probably repeat shit because I can't be trusted with that kind of information.
Guilty.
but I asked him, I said, was it worth the money? He goes, I would have spent 10 times what I spent to learn what I learned in there.
Oh my God.
I want to know so bad. Yeah. Imagine to be able just to go through there and just to hold some of the artifacts. Right. And then to read shit and to get some questions answered. But he's a man of his word and he's not going to talk out of turn or anything, but what great use of your money. He does charities and all, and he does all of that other shit also to be rich enough to be able to just write a check and say, I want to get it. I want to know all of your secrets.
Does he want to sponsor us three to go and find out?
I asked him that. I said, yo, you got to take me next time. He goes, I don't know if there's going to be a next time. It's not something that they do a lot, whatever. And there was a negotiation with lawyers and all of that to get him in there, but he went, he did it.
I just want to see what they really have about the Templar case. Like, I really
great question. Fuck. Me too. I'd love that among a million other things I want to know. Right. Exactly. I want to see transcripts from the Inquisition,
right.
Like I want to see Galileo's notebooks. I want to see Da Vinci stuff. I want to see, gosh, I don't even know where I would start,
Yeah. Cause this would have to be a multi-year hall pass in order to even begin to wrap your head around some of that stuff.
Yeah, he had 5 days and a very specific list. They said you got to narrow it down. And again, this was all through negotiations, but he had 5 days. I forget what 10 hours a day or 12 hours a day, something like that. Found he got everything that he was looking for.
Oh, that's freaking wild. I would say take me to your ancient Roman section and show me what you got.
Right. I haven't been to Italy probably in 10 years, but I'm going back. We're taking the family, and me and my oldest, we're going to stand on the spot where Caesar was assassinated.
Oh yeah. That's my plan to get there.
Right to it, dude. You can stand right there. It's crazy. Yep. So I can't wait.
Yeah. I would tell you this. One of the highlights of my academic life was serving as a PhD consultant for a student and getting to rifle through all of the prayer scrolls, the demonic prayer scrolls of that had been preserved at Howard University. That was amazing. And I compare and contrast that with the ability to get access to the archives. And I couldn't even begin to imagine the wonder. It just leaves me breathless. Dear Lord.
I've thought about it almost every day since he told me. It's been 4 years now.
I would too.
Yeah.
God, instead of wondering what your superpower would be, that would be, okay, what 5 topics would I pick in order to do the research? I want to think about that for a damn long time.
Yeah. During the fires here in LA in January, we got an evacuation order. We didn't have to. It was ready, set, go. We were in the set place. And so it was pack one bag to be able to get ready to get the out of there. And as I'm packing the bag, I'm going, man, what if I had that in the archives? I was like, okay, you got to learn one thing. You got a 20-minute session in the archive. Where would you get? I'm like, I don't know. But it was it jumps into my head at moments like that. Or I'm sitting at a red light. I'm like, ooh, I wonder if this was on Chris's list. Ooh, I wonder if this was on his list. He wouldn't answer anything. And I get it. I respect him for it, but still.
Maybe one day you'd be lucky.
I don't even know where I would start.
Oh, that's
anyway. Yeah. But this has been great. I'm very happy with that you had me on. This has been awesome. I hope this is the beginning of a thing and not not a one-shot deal. Let's stay in touch.
Absolutely, man.
Something would be great.
Yeah, and I would love, if you ever have the time, I would love to be able to have you on Southern Demonology.
Let's make it happen. You get my email from Chris, and let's go. Let me know, and we'll nail down a date and time, and we'll make it happen.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Branden, thank you so much on today's show. I
Absolutely.
thought we would just talk about, some true crime, but we touched a little bit of everything. And on top of that, you are a Yankee fan, so you are always welcome back on the show. Branden, tell the people how they can find you, find your podcast, and what you got coming down the pipeline.
Yankees to the bone, first of all. Okay. Second, that's right. The show's called The Devil Within. I'd appreciate if you guys go check it out. I've got almost 4 full seasons out and about 100 weekly episodes, and I update weekly. And season 1 of the show about the Tommy Sullivan case is being turned into a 4-part documentary on a major streamer. Sorry to sound like a douche, but I can't say which one it is yet until it comes out. But keep an eye out for it. You won't be able to miss it. It comes out in October. Other than that, just happy to be here, and I look forward to talking to you guys some more in the future.
Absolutely. Same here, man. And listeners, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Go ahead and check out Branden's show. It's awesome. Hope everyone enjoyed today's episode.
Thank you for listening to Southern Demonology. Find us online at southerndemonology.com, which offers links to all of our social media and episodes. Southern Demonology is solely owned, produced, and edited by myself, and the intro and outro music are composed by me as well. If you have a moment, please rate, like, and share this podcast, as it is the best way to help support my work. As always, I am JJ, and it has been a pleasure to speak to you today.
Brace the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Get started today at linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply.
What makes a great pair of glasses? At Warby Parker, it's all the invisible extras without the extra cost. Their designer quality frames start at $95, including prescription lenses, plus scratch-resistant, smudge-resistant, and anti-reflective coatings, and UV protection, and free adjustments for life. To find your next pair of glasses, sunglasses, or contact lenses, or to find the Warby Parker store nearest you, head over to warbyparker.com. That's warbyparker.com.
When you think of skyrocketing brands like Aloe, Allbirds, or Skims, it's easy to credit their success to great products, sleek branding, and brilliant marketing. But here's the overlooked secret. The real magic lies in the engine behind the scenes, the business powering their business. For millions of brands, that engine is Shopify, making selling seamless for them and shopping effortless for us. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Aloe Yoga uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/retail, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/retail to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/retail.